So last week in part one of our series, we started looking at upgrade stores, which are a strategic component that we can add to a game to make us more powerful as the game progresses. We're going to invest gains that we make early in the game and spend them strategically on upgrades that are going to make us more powerful as we face more and more powerful enemies later on in the game. So we started off last week by building an upgrade menu that's accessible by pushing the upgrade button. And from there, we can get to a menu where we can select from 4 different upgradable components that we can click on and buy if we have enough money. So when we left off last week, we managed to change the graphics around on our spaceships, but they really just function the same way. This week we're going to add some extra code that's going to make our ship actually have new features and new abilities as we buy upgrades to it. So that, for example, when we upgrade our laser, we can go from a single laser system to a double laser to the powerful Pluto shock cannon that's going to really lay waste to your screen. So all that and more coming right up. Let's get right to it. So I've continued developing the game some more after our part 1 lesson here, and I've added a whole bunch of new graphics and sound effects. So it's going to be a little difficult for you guys to catch up if you've been working on the starter file that I gave you back in part 1. I've created a brand new starter file here that basically has all the components we completed in part 1. And if you're going to continue coding with me today, I suggest you work on that. You can see that we've added a whole bunch of new graphics, including an enemy type and some missile and laser graphics, and all of them have associated sound effects with them as well. For example, with our lasers here, we have 3 different levels of laser sound effects here. Laser 0 for the basic laser, laser 1 for the upgraded, and laser 2 for the fully upgraded laser. So you'll find little changes like that sprinkled all throughout the file, and I would suggest you go to the starter file that I've created with all of these added components and with the coding we did in part 1. So you can find the link for that in the description down below, and I would suggest you get started from there, or you're going to find some of the components you need are missing. Of course, you can always go ahead and create your own components and graphics and sound effects if you just want to keep working on your own file, and you're welcome to do that. So to get started with the coding here, we're going to start working on making our ship move around the screen. You can see in our upgrade menu here, the top item is a control system that allows us to change the movement of our ship around. We can buy lateral fins, and then our next upgrade level here is something called directional boosters. So it's a level 1 and level 2 upgrade that affects the mobility of our ship as well as changing the look of our graphics here. So we're going to create a movement system here that will change the speed of our movement depending on what level of upgrade we have here. So for starters, let's just create a starter position. I'm inside the ship sprite here. And under the green flag where I'm broadcasting start game, we're just setting a start position at the bottom center of the screen. So an X of 0, a Y of minus 150. Now, also under the green flag here, we're going to create a new green flag and add a forever here. And here's where our main movement loop is going to happen. Now, last week we set up a system where a variable called gameplay was switched on or off. And that allows so that the game won't continue playing while we're in our upgrade menu. We don't want to be killed by aliens and have other stuff going on in the game while we're in our upgrade menu. So everything we do inside this game has to be wrapped up inside an if statement here that says if gameplay equals on, and then we can do stuff. Otherwise, stuff is really going to start happening out of your control while you're looking at this menu. So inside this gameplay if statement, we're going to place 4 more if statements, 1 for each direction of movement. Let's go grab the first one here. We're going to say if key right arrow pressed. What we're going to do is change our X, but instead of changing it by a fixed number, we're going to change it by a variable called move speed. And so this move speed variable is going to change depending on which upgrade we've purchased. The other constraint we're going to have to add here is we don't want to be flying off the screen. So when we press the right arrow, we want to keep moving right until we get to an X value of around 210. And at that point, we want to stop moving so we don't go off the edge of the screen. So I'm going to add an and here. Instead of key right arrow pressed, I'm going to say key right arrow pressed and X position is less than 210. And now if we get into our game here, you can see that I can move to the right, but as soon as I get too close to the edge of the screen, my movement stops. Okay, so we're going to have to initialize that movement speed variable. We can do that over here under when I receive start game. Right now I've set my credits to a default value of 100,000. We're going to change this back to 0 again later on, but right now for testing purposes, we want to be able to buy lots of upgrades without having to worry about earning them. So I'm going to set the credits artificially high, and we're going to set our move speed here to 4, which is going to be the default move speed with the default movement system here. All right, so now we can carry on with the movement. Most of this is just variations of the same theme, but let me show you what we're going to do here. I'm going to take this if statement, right click on it and duplicate it and create a copy of what we've done here before. Now we are going to have to make a few changes. Firstly, let's go change the right arrow to left arrow. Now, to constrain our movement here, we don't care about the right side of the screen anymore. We're looking at the left side of the screen. So if our X position is greater than minus 210, then we'll be able to go, then we won't be able to move any further. So that'll constrain our movement to the left. Now, right now, we're still moving to the right. We're changing our X by move speed of 4, so we're still moving to the right. How do we change this to a leftward motion? Well, all we have to do is take that and turn it into a negative number, which if we remember our math, you can do quite easily by just multiplying by -1. So we're going to multiply our move speed by -1, and there we are. Okay, I've already pre-made the next 2 sections here, and you can see that they're just variations on the same thing. So if I'm pressing my up arrow, I'm going to change my Y position, but I'm only going to let myself go up to a Y of 0, so we're not allowed at the top side of the screen. And for my down arrow, I'm going to constrain it to -150, which will bring us to the bottom of the screen here. And again, I'm going to change my Y speed by a negative number here for the down arrow. Once all that's placed, you can see that our movement's going quite smoothly. I can move to the left, down, and then up this high. And there's basically a rectangle on the screen here that I'm allowed to move at. There we go. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to have to add some code here that changes the movement around depending on our thruster upgrade level, which is the variable we created back in part 1. You can see here I have an if statement pre-baked here for you that says if thruster upgrade level equals 1, which is the first upgrade, we're going to change that movement speed to 6. And the same thing for the next level of upgrade, which is we're going to set move speed to 10. And so depending on what upgrade we have, we're going to be able to significantly increase our speed of movement across the screen. Now, we're just going to have it checking this upgrade level every time we come around this loop. So let's put this inside the forever statement, but outside of these other if statements, so it's just constantly assessing what our upgrade level is. Let's go test that out. We'll go and upgrade. And we'll buy our lateral fins. And it's not too obvious. You can see the graphics of the game have changed around, and our movement's a little bit spiffier here now. And now if we upgrade to the next level, directional boosters, you can see that we're moving quite a bit faster across the screen now. Beautiful. Now that our movement system is up and running, we can start to work on our laser beams here. Now I do have a laser sprite set up with the beams, and we've got 3 levels of beams here. Here's the default beam. These are all facing to the right, of course, because they're pointing in direction 90, and later on we're going to spin them so they're facing upwards, but this is generally the way you want to set up any sprite in Scratch so that it's facing to the right of the default. So there's our level 0 laser. Here's our level 1 laser, which is more of a yellow dot. I know it's a little hard to see on the screen here. And our level 2 laser, which is the Pluto shock cannon. We're going to create a more sophisticated looking red laser beam here. Well, sorry, laser energy burst or whatever you want to call it. Okay, but we're not going to code the actual firing mechanism inside the laser beam here. As I've mentioned in previous lessons, if we create clones inside of the sprite that we're cloning, and we create a clone of myself, we can often have the clones end up creating clones of themselves, which start sparking more and more clones on the screen, many of which you can't see because they're stacked up on top of each other. So if you notice your shooting games are lagging a lot, that's often the reason why. So we want to create the clone outside the actual laser beam, and that's why I'm going to do it inside the ship. So let's go have a look at the code for the ship here. And we're going to trigger the laser beam here when I press the space key. And the first thing we're going to want to do is control the timing of our laser. We're not going to want to be able to fire until our timer gets over the amount of time that we said is the laser recharge rate. So basically what's happening here is we're waiting until that timer variable is larger than the laser recharge rate. Now by default this is going to be 0.3, so we're going to be able to fire about 3 shots per second. So as soon as the timer gets over 0.3, it's going to release this wait until and go to the next slot here. So that's what we're going to do. All right, so this timer is going to wait a different amount of time depending on what our laser recharge level is, and that's going to be determined by the laser upgrade level, which laser beam we've currently purchased. So down below here we're going to do a series of if statements that are going to create the clones of our laser beams depending on our laser upgrade level. Let's start with the simplest one, upgrade level 0. So if laser upgrade level is equal to 0, we're going to have to set a few variables here. So we're going to set our laser index. Laser index is a local variable. So when we created the variable, we clicked on for this sprite only here, and that made it a variable that applies only to that one laser beam, and that will allow us to position this laser beam in a different spot from other ones. Later on when we're firing 2 or 3 lasers at a time, each one's going to have to be controlled individually, and we're going to do that using this laser index. Okay, so in here we're going to set our laser recharge time, which as I said starts at 0.3, and then we're going to create a clone of our laser beam here. So this is all going to happen after this timer event goes off and we're allowed to shoot again. Okay, so now let's go over to our laser beam and let's make it start firing. So I'll go back to our laser and we can start coding that now. Okay, so we're going to want this laser beam creation code to work a little differently depending on what laser upgrade level we've purchased. So the default here, laser upgrade level 0, if we're inside this level, then we're going to want to set our laser recharge rate to the 0.3 as discussed before. Then we're going to want to attach a laser index number to each beam, basically. The idea is we're going to fire one laser beam for our first level laser, and our level 2 is going to fire 2 beams. Each of those is going to have to function a little bit differently. The number 1 laser is going to have to go a little bit to the left, and the second beam on the level 1 laser is going to go off to the right. And so to position those independently, we're going to have to attach a variable to them. We're going to create a local variable, but the problem is we can't create a local variable and manipulate it inside of this ship because the local variable has to be inside our laser. That's a bit of a conundrum, and I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out what to do here. And what we came up with is that we're going to create a global variable here called laser index. We're going to attach a number to it, and then when the laser is created, it's going to convert this number to a local variable. It'll make a little bit more sense as we go through it, so just bear with me right now. So the first thing we're doing here is we're saying after we set our laser recharge rate, we're going to identify this laser beam as a number 1 type laser. And then we're going to create it. So as soon as we create it, it's going to trigger a event over in the laser beam here. So let's go over to our laser beam. When I start as a clone, now we're going to want to show the laser because it's hidden by default. And in fact, if we haven't done that yet, we should probably set that up right now. So under the green flag, let's set up a hide here for the master laser beam. So when I start the clone, it's going to show, and then we're going to want to take the laser index that we created under the ship here and convert it into a local variable. So I've created another variable here called laser index local. And remember, this is a local variable, which means we clicked for this sprite only when we created it. So we're going to set that to match what our laser index was. So as soon as it detects over here in the ship that we've got a type 1 laser with an index of 1, it's going to take that variable and convert it into a local variable so that that clone will have that number attached to it, and it will function according to the rules for a type 1 laser. Okay. So what's going to happen next here? We're going to play a sound effect. So we're going to start a sound effect. We're going to have it basically, since our laser sound effects are labeled quite nicely here, laser 0, laser 1, laser 2, we don't have to call a different sound effect for each type of laser. We're just going to join the word laser with the upgrade level. So as you can see when I click here, where that outputs a laser 0. And if I change this around to laser upgrade level 1, it'll change that to laser 1. And so it'll play a different sound effect depending on what our laser upgrade level is. Now we want to switch our costume as well, and we're going to do the same trick here. We're going to switch our costume to laser plus laser upgrade level. And you can see our costumes are all labeled laser 0, laser 1, laser 2, just like our sound effects are labeled the same way as well. Okay, so we're looking good and sounding good now. We want to make sure we're pointed in the right direction, so let's point in direction 0 because the bullets are shooting straight up. We're going to send our clone over to the ship where it's going to want to fire. We're going to go to the back layer so that our laser appears underneath the ship, so that if there's any overlap, it doesn't appear from the middle of the ship. It'll appear to grow out of the spaceship. So the laser beam we've just created is stamped with that laser index local number 1, which means it's the first beam that we're creating here. And that one's just going to come out of the middle of the ship. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to change its Y coordinate by 20. That's going to happen instantaneously. We're not really starting the missile's movement yet. We're just setting up the beam's starting position before it starts moving. So we're going to move it about 20 pixels up from the center of the ship, which should bring it to around here so that it starts moving from this position. So wherever the ship is, it's going to pop right into the middle of that sprite, then immediately jump up and then start its movement cycle here. Let's go ahead and get its movement cycle going. So we're just going to repeat until touching the edge of the screen. We're going to move at a speed of 10. And then after we're done this repeat loop, when we touch the edge of the screen, we're going to delete the clone. So this should get our laser beam working quite nicely here. Let's give it a little run through. So when I hit the space key, there we go. My laser beam's firing quite nicely here. Okay, so that's it for our type 1 laser. Let's go back to our ship and set up our second laser. So our second laser is also going to shoot straight up in the air. It's going to shoot different shaped little round bullets. And what we're going to have to do is offset the starting position of these bullets so that they go a little to the left and a little to the right, so that we have two columns of lasers appearing here that are going to be shooting outwards. So let's go ahead and make that change now. We're back inside the ship now. So if we've bought the first upgrade level for our laser, then our laser upgrade level will be equal to 1. And now things are going to function a little bit differently. I'm going to leave the laser recharge time the same here. So we're going to have twice the number of bullets, but they're going to be firing at the same rate, 0.3. We don't have to change that variable here because we already set it to 0.3 when we fired our first lasers. All right, so now we're going to have to create two new lasers here, and each one of them is going to function differently. So we're going to take this laser index, we're going to set it to 2 for our second laser beam, but we're also going to be creating our third laser beam here. So laser index 2 and 3 are both going to be attached to this laser upgrade level 1, if that makes any sense to you. So we're going to set that laser index to 2. We're going to create a clone here. So let's create a clone of the laser. It's going to be stamped with that index 2. Now we can go ahead and create the next laser, laser number 3 here, and create a clone, but this is going to create a problem. Right now, inside this if statement, all of this stuff is being executed basically simultaneously. So we've got a global variable here, laser index, and it's going to immediately set it to 3. It's going to basically ignore this. It's going to set it to 2 and then immediately set it to 3. And so we're going to end up with both our new lasers labeled as 3 instead of 2. That's a problem. So we need to create a little bit of a delay here. Not a delay that's going to affect the speed of the game, though, just enough so that the computer cycles over and goes and basically goes and has time to initiate this first set of commands before it initiates a second set of commands. So we can do that with a wait 0 seconds command. Now that seems like a bit of a contradiction that you're waiting for no time at all, but just substituting this block in here makes the code pause for just long enough to change these variables over before it creates the next clone and stamps it with a different number. So now we end up with a clone 2 and a clone 3 that have both been created properly using this wait 0 seconds hack here. So we're back inside our laser beam here again, and we're going to want to add those 2 new laser beams, number 2 and number 3, that are being created by that upgrade level. So we're going to want to process that before we start moving. So let's just temporarily detach this bit of code here, the repeat until and everything below it. And we're going to add another if statement here that's going to identify the next laser beam. So if laser index local equals 2, and also we're going to do another one for laser index local equals 3. So these are the 2 laser beams that are going to be created by that level of laser. So now we want to offset these guys again. So we're going to change that left guy by -12. And we're going to change his Y by 20, just like we did with the first laser beam. So this is going to be a little bit to the left of where the first laser beam was created. And let's duplicate that. And we're going to change this next one by 12, by +12. And so now we're going to have 2 parallel rows of laser beams running simultaneously. Let's reattach that bottom code here and give this a test. So we're shooting right now, and you can see the laser beams working the way that we want it to. We can go ahead and buy the upgrade, and let's buy the twin xenon lasers. And there you can see our graphic has changed, and we have some bullets going out of them quite nicely. The only problem, though, is because we added a bit of a delay back inside our ship. Remember that 0 second delay? That basically pushed that second animation back 1 frame behind the other one. So you can see that these 2 lasers aren't coming out parallel with each other. It's not a big deal, but we do want to clean that up a little bit. And what we can do is just reinsert that delay back into laser index local so that it doesn't, so that it has a second to let laser 3 catch up to it. Let me just show you. I'm going to add a wait 0 seconds back into here again. And now let's try fire one more time. You can see that now the 2 lasers are coming out exactly parallel to each other. Beautiful. And they're really nicely lined up with the edge of that laser beam. So that's all working very nicely now. So this took a bit of experimentation, and it's one of those unpredictable things that can happen when you start having one sprite coordinating the timing of another one. So we have to do a couple of these clever little hacks here to make sure stuff happens simultaneously. Okay, the third laser works very much the same way as the as a level 2 one, but this time we're going to do 3 lasers, and we're also going to point them in different directions as well. So let's go back to our ship again, and let's set up a bit of code here. I'm just going to plunk this in pretty much right away here, and I'll explain as I go along here rather than building it step by step. So if our laser upgrade level is equal to 2, so that's the highest upgrade level, then we're going to set that laser recharge rate to 0.1. So we're going to be able to fire this next laser quite a bit faster than the first one. And we're going to be setting up laser 4, 5, and 6 here. We need 3 different beams created. So under laser 4, we're going to create a laser, and again, we're going to wait 0 seconds. Then we're going to set laser index 5. So we're going to stamp that one with this, with that number 5. We're going to create a clone and wait 0 seconds. Again, we're leaving time for that label, the local variable, to be attached to the laser beam. And then we're going to create laser 6 and create a laser. At the very end of this, we're going to reset that timer so that it's back down to 0 again, and that will stop us from firing our laser too much. Okay, so let's go back to our laser beam again, where we're going to want to program the position and some other variables for the next 3 lasers. So what the laser index 4, 5, and 6, which are all going to be created by that Pluto shock cannon, the most powerful laser that we have available. So you can see here that under laser index local, let's go ahead and attach that repeat until first, of course, so that happens at the very end. Okay, so if my laser index local is equal to 4, which is the first of our 3 red lasers, we're just going to place it in the middle of the screen. So we're going to just change our Y by 20, the same way we did for our original laser. Now for the next laser, index local 5, we're going to want to offset it to the left, like we did for our level 2 laser, level 1 laser. And we're still going to position it up a little bit. We're also going to point it off to the left at a 45-degree angle. We're going to do the same thing but the opposite direction for our last laser, index local 6. So we're going to offset it to the right, move it up, and point it at a 45-degree angle to the right. Let's reattach our movement scheme here, and let's give this a little test. So we'll click the green flag here, and you can see that my ship is shooting properly. Let's upgrade to the twin xenon lasers. Those are working beautifully too. And last but not least, here we go with the Pluto shock cannon. Let's see how that goes. Beautiful. Isn't that lovely? Alright, and as you can see, the shooting speed is much increased here. Let me try blasting these out. So we can shoot quite a few more bullets out with that as compared to the regular cannon. Here's the default cannon, firing as fast as it can, 3 shots per minute. So we can get quite a few more bullets out of here with the upgrade enabled. Excellent. One last little bit of housekeeping inside the ship sprite. We're not going to want to shoot while we have our menu open, so we're going to use the same mechanism here to shut that off that we do across the rest of the game. If gameplay equals on, we're going to allow this to happen. So I'm going to take all the content underneath the space key here and place it all inside the if statement, and then I'm going to attach that back to the space key. And so now, see I'm firing, and when I'm in my upgrade menu, that firing will no longer work. I'm no longer hearing the sound effect. Perfect. One last little bit of housekeeping inside the ship sprite. We're not going to want to shoot while we have our menu open, so we're going to use the same mechanism here to shut that off that we do across the rest of the game. If gameplay equals on, we're going to allow this to happen. So I'm going to take all the content underneath the space key here and place it all inside the if statement, and then I'm going to attach that back to the space key. And so now, see I'm firing, and when I'm in my upgrade menu, that firing will no longer work. I'm no longer hearing the sound effect. Perfect. So next up, we're going to have something to shoot at, I think, for us to continue testing this. So I have created basically an alien that we can use to shoot at in this game. I've called him Enemy, and you can see I've created a nice little costume for him. So to create this alien, I just repurposed an existing Scratch creature. I took this ladybug, and I basically ungrouped it and started deleting elements of it. I deleted the mouth, deleted one of the eyes, centered the other eye, and then removed a few of the legs, and then removed these dots from the creature's body. And having finished all of that, I'm left with something that looks close enough to an alien spaceship that I think it's pretty good. Now, I've made my spaceship face to the right, as you always should do when you're creating a new sprite. That way it'll be oriented properly when we try to spin it. I've also created some additional costumes for explosions. I've imported an animated GIF of an explosion, and you can see that as we cycle through it, we get all the different phases of the explosion until it finally fades away to nothing. So every time one of our bad guys gets hit, we're going to use the same explosion animation and just run through all these frames just to make it look convincingly like it's blown up. The same explosion animation is used inside the main ship. You can see we have a master sprite here, and then we've got a bunch of explosion clips. Okay, so the basic game plan for this alien character is we're going to have him spawn across the top of the screen in a random position. not too close to the edge. And then we're going to have him drop down a little bit, and then at a random time he's going to kind of spin around a little bit just to confuse your sights a little bit, and then move a little bit more, and then perhaps spin again. If he ever exits the screen during the course of spinning around here, he'll just disappear off the screen so that we don't have to keep track of him after he's left the screen. Alright, so let's go ahead and start coding that. We're going to start with a green flag, and I've created a new global variable here called enemy wait time. So that's going to be the 2 seconds in between the first enemy being created and the next enemy being created. That number is going to slowly go down, and that's why we put it inside a variable here. So we're going to make it slowly go down during the course of the game. Alright, so the main gameplay loop here is going to be inside of a forever, and we're going to be constantly checking if gameplay is on, as we've done elsewhere in the game here. Alright, so before we spawn our first guy, we're going to want to wait that wait time. So I'm going to grab a wait 2 seconds block from my control blocks here, and I'm going to add that variable enemy wait time, which I grabbed from my variables list here. Wait, so at first we're going to wait 2 seconds, and then after that 2 second wait, we're going to create a clone of ourselves. And then inside there, we're going to add another if statement. So down below, create clone of myself. We're setting basically a maximum here. If enemy wait time is greater than 0.1, then we're going to allow ourselves to make that time go down. So the time's going to drop down in tiny increments of 0.02 second increments. So inside here, we're going to change the enemy wait time to minus 0.02. So it's slowly over the course of the game going to make the enemies come faster and faster and faster as that wait time gets smaller. But we're limiting it here so that at the very end, this number here is 0.1 seconds. It's the fastest that it's going to be allowed to create new guys. So at the end, we're going to be creating 10 new guys a second. Now you can modify that if you want to. You can change that to 0.2, for example, and that would make 5 new guys created every second, or 0.5. Whatever you think is a good maximum difficulty level for this game. I'm going to stick with 0.1 here. I haven't really fully play tested this game, so I'm not quite sure how that's going to work out once we get our whole weapons loadout ready to go. So we're basically creating our enemies here and making them faster and faster and faster as time goes on here. Perfect. So now let's determine what they're going to do once they're created on the screen. So when our clones get created, we're going to want to play a little bit of a sound just to let the player know that a new bad guy has entered the screen. I've created a spawn sound here. I've actually downloaded it from my favorite sound download website, freesound.org, which has thousands and thousands of fantastic video game oriented sounds, all for free. Make sure you credit them, of course, but yeah, there's lots of wonderful things here, and it's completely free. Anyway, so when I start the clone, we're going to play this spawn sound, which goes a little like this. That's really cool. Alright, and that's going to happen faster and faster and faster and more ominous as the game continues. So let's go play that sound, or start sound. Then, because we've hidden it over here under the green flag, let's show our clones. And we'll get them set up at the top of the screen. So I'm using a go to XY command here, and I'm filling up the X position with a random number. So I'm going from minus 230, which is just about to the left edge of the screen, to positive 230, which is just about to the right edge of the screen. The Y is always going to be at the top of the screen, which is a Y of 180. So we don't need to randomize that because our enemies are always going to appear at the top of the screen. All right, so when our player starts, we're going to want him to go straight down the screen for a little bit. So I'm using a repeat 10 times loop and making him move 5 times. We're going to add a few more repeat loops here and that are going to make our character spin and do some other stuff in a second. But firstly, we got to talk about how to get all this action to pause when we need it to. We don't want the aliens moving down the screen when we're not looking, when we're on our menu screen. So how do we pause the game? Now I could do what I did with the rest of my control mechanisms and wrap this entire movement scheme into an if gameplay equals on if statement so that this entire loop doesn't run if gameplay is on. But what happens if we've just started this loop and then we pause the upgrade cycle? What's going to happen is it's going to continue to run through this entire thing. It's going to move and then rotate and then move a little bit more and rotate before it comes around this loop and realizes that gameplay is now off. So if we want it to stop faster than that, we're going to have it check a little bit more often. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab this if gameplay is equal to on, and every time we give a movement command to our character, I'm going to wrap it inside one of these loops again. So let's grab the move 5 steps and we'll pop it inside here. And it'll just ignore that until while gameplay is off, and when it's on, it'll just continue to run the 5 steps in a repeat loop here. Okay, so that will take care of that. We're going to have to keep doing that as time goes on here. Okay, so we've moved 50 pixels down the screen. Next, I'm going to grab this entire block of code here, and I'm going to put it underneath the other repeat loop. So what we're doing here is we're repeating a random amount of time from 5 to 10 times. And again, we're going to move for a fixed amount of time, but based on a random number here. So it's going to continue to move another 50 to 100 pixels down the screen, which will get it about this far. And at some point, depending on this random number, it'll go into the next step here. And this is where it loops. So we're going to move an indeterminate amount of distance. We want to, at the beginning, have him move straight for quite a while. But then we are going to want him to loop. So let's go grab a third if statement, and this is the looping if statement here. So we're going to pick a random number here from 1 to 2, and we're basically flipping a coin as to whether he's going to go to the spin to the right or spin to the left. Each spin is 360 degrees, so we're going to turn 10 degrees 36 times, and that'll take us all the way around the circle, basically. So if gameplay is equal to on, we're going to move 5 steps and turn 10 degrees. And so we're moving 5 steps in whatever the direction is that we're facing, but we're going to be confident in the knowledge that at the end of this loop, they're going to be facing straight down again and then continue turning. So if my random number does end up being a 1, we're going to go through this loop. Otherwise, we're going to do the else statement, which is the exact same bit of code, except flipped in the other direction. Now we can flip in the other direction by using the turn counterclockwise command, but just to make things simpler on myself, I actually just changed this to -10 degrees, which of course will spin our guys in the opposite direction. Okay, so I think we're ready to give these guys a little test now, so let's have a look. Click the green flag. So there's our first bad guy. He's swooping down the screen here. Beautiful. And they are coming across the end. I was a little worried about that. They were on the right side of the screen, but they're coming across the screen quite nicely now. Still can't interact with them. Nothing's going to happen, of course. And when they touch me, nothing's going to happen. We're going to deal with that. You can also see that they're kind of stacking up at the bottom of the screen, so we haven't said anything about these guys yet. Let's take care of that next. So we're done with this main movement loop. Now we're going to grab a when I start as a clone, and we're going to simultaneously be checking for collisions and a few other things inside this when I start as a clone loop. So the first thing we're going to need is make sure that we're in the proper costume. If we're accidentally on an explosion costume, of course that's going to mess us up. So let's switch costume to enemy. We're going to set our enemy size to 40. The bug default size is a little bit high. Let me show you what it would actually look like at 100%. And so that's a bit too big for our game. That's why I'm shrinking it to 40. And later on, we're going to be switching the explosion to a different size as well, I believe to 20%. So we're going to want to reset that size again to make sure that our new enemy has been created at the proper size. All right. Before we do anything, we're just going to wait for 1 second here before we actually start moving. So he's going to appear at the top of the screen, pause for 1 second, and then start moving. All right, let's grab a forever here. And here's where we're going to do our collision detection. So we're going to go if touching edge, delete this clone. So he's constantly going to be checking to see if he's off the edge of the screen. Now that's where this 1 second delay comes in, right? If I didn't add this delay, the ladybug would immediately be touching the edge of the screen right at the top here when he was being created, and he would delete himself right away. This is a rookie error that I see all the time when kids are making games. So if you've got a system where an object is deleting itself when it leaves the screen, remember that if he's off the screen at the beginning of the game, then he's never actually going to appear in the game. So that's what this 1 second is about. We know he's going to spin down for at least a couple of seconds before he starts spinning around and potentially going back off the screen again and deleting himself. All right, so next we need to set this guy up to be destroyed. Now there's a bunch of stuff that can destroy this enemy. He can be destroyed by a laser beam, by a missile, or by this white screen, which I'm going to explain to you next week. The white screen is simply a gigantic sprite with nothing, it's filled with nothing but white, and we're going to use that in our next lesson to create a giant missile that will destroy everything on the entire screen, basically. And it'll flash that white up briefly while it's happening. Now, for now, we don't need to worry about that, but we might as well set it up right now. So if touching any of these three things, we're going to get into a custom block here called destroy. And that's what will actually trigger the explosion inside our enemy. So, remember, if you've got multiple if statements, multiple or statements, and you're trying to put them onto the screen, you have to basically create a third bubble here by putting one or statement into another or statement. You can keep going like that and create as many conditions as you want. Which order they're in isn't really important. We're just checking if any of these things are true. Okay, we've got one more little bit of code that we're going to add here, but not until next week, and that has to do with hitting shield, which we're going to deal with a little bit differently. All right, so let's go ahead and deal with this destruction code, which is a custom block. Remember, we can make custom blocks here by clicking on Make a Block and then typing the word destroy here. We're not going to use that in the advanced functions inside Make a Block today, so we'll just hit the default and hit OK. And that'll create a little custom definition block here that we can use to define what happens when we get destroyed. And we also can create one of these little activation blocks here that we can put inside our code, just as we've done right here. Okay, so what happens when we receive a destruction message? First thing we're going to do is we're going to stop the movement of our bad guy. So we're going to stop other scripts in the sprite. This is only for this particular clone. All the rest of the clones are going to keep moving, but this guy is going to stop moving and stop doing all the other stuff that that this clone has been programmed to do. We're going to play in a little 8-bit explosion sound that I've downloaded from Freesound. It sounds like this. There we go. We're going to set our size because we're about to go into an explosion here, and our explosion's a little bit too big. So I could have resized this explosion by dragging out the vectors, the bitmaps to a smaller size, but then I might not have gotten the size set up properly, so it's much more accurate to use a sizing command here. So I'm setting the size to 20%. We're going to switch to the first explosion. Now I've got actually 12 different explosion graphics here, going from 2 to 13. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to manually switch to the explosion graphics, which will get us to number 2. Then I'm going to do a repeat 11 times to get us through a series of next costumes that will take us all the way to that last costume. So as you can see on the screen here, I can actually trigger this. Let's actually add a space key event a keyboard command to that. I'll just attach it to a letter A for now. And you can watch that explosion in action. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, that's perfect. So let's attach all of this code down here. So we're repeating 11 times. After we destroy our enemy, we're going to give ourselves some money as a reward. So we're going to give ourselves 200 credits. And then we're going to delete the clone and we'll be done with that bad guy. All right, so our bad guy should be fully shootable now, and he should be making a lovely explosion graphic. Let's give that a try. There we go. Beautiful. All right, we already have a fun here. Nice. Do a little upgrade to the next level of lasers and see how our other lasers do. Beautiful. Alright, just for fun, let's pull out our Pluto shock cannon and give you guys some hell here. And you can see these guys are coming more and more quickly on the screen. And they'll be coming so fast in the end that you won't really know what to do with them. That's why we're going to upgrade with missiles and other defensive systems as time goes on. The bad guys still are not messing with us at all, though, and we're going to have to make ourselves vulnerable to them in the long run. Oh, you can see that getting faster and faster and faster now. So that about wraps it up for part 2 of this series. And next week we're going to add our shields, which are going to protect us from these bad guys. They're going to recharge themselves and kind of start to fade away as they get hit by enemies. And we're also going to add a missile system. These missiles are going to be kind of area effect missiles that destroy more than one enemy at once. And you're going to need those because these guys are going to start spawning very, very quickly. So looking forward to that. In the meantime, happy gaming, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying what you see on this channel. I hit the 700 subscriber mark this week, and I'm aiming to get to 1,000 before school starts again. So let's get those subscriptions coming in. Thanks, and bye now.